All right. For the audience that doesn't know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
Good day, George. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for the invitation.
No problem. So tell us a little bit about what you do, and yeah, just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I'm the chairperson of the United States Presidential Service Badge Foundation, and we represent about 20,000 of the what I call 1% of the most patriotic individuals in the United States. So that's a big ticket. And where it starts at is, as we say, is 18 acres, which is the White House itself. We are awardees of the Presidential Service Badge, and only one of two other individuals authorized to wear the badge: Secret Service, and of course, the President of the United States.
Well, I was I was just looking at your LinkedIn page too, and you've done work for everyone from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, like for security for them, ranging to being the transition team at the White House between 2021 and 2022, which was a very rough time, um, and doing a lot of security between 1989 and 1995. That's a little bit more broad.
Sure. When we paint that brush, uh, you think about security. Uh, that's many years of training that go behind that. So when we think of working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that was three of them, starting with General Vesey and ending with General Powell. Um, so the requirements are just as stringent because that's the executive branch of the Department of Defense. And then General Powell saying to me one day, it's time for you to go over to the White House, and that's how it started. So there's the training continues. It's a constant. It's a constant growth period that you see there, and of course there's a lot of in betweens. People that travel on that journey with you, uh, and I look at it now and ask myself, how do my younger alum actually get through the week or the month. And as you know, in the foundation, we just released our new book, one of 10 series, entitled The No Failed Mission, authored by Anthony Knopf. So there's a lot there. When you also look at my NSA days, when I worked cyber courses, it was an interesting time, and those type of, let's say, responsibilities are still there through people that are still with the agency.
So, what do you think you? So, when you're doing personal security for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is a few different people, right? What does that look like? What does their day to day look like?
Well, George, that's a very good question, and as you know, we have been trying to work with Secret Service uh, through, let's say, the 1960s, when an executive order was signed recognizing the service badge. So in that, you know, there's no in between in the continuity of government, especially when it comes to the security. I put an analogy of the days of the Romans. If the Romans traveled around the world and they were stopped, and all that came out of them, we are Romans, and then they were given a passageway. So there's a level of security that goes on for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but it's still the same protocols that follow you across that river over to the White House. If that makes sense, George, we're still racing cars, we're still dodging bullets, um, and we're still handling communications.
Well, you also did work for the NSA, you were mentioning. So, when it comes to the communications, I can imagine that's a major struggle for the security of people like the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And as you can imagine, every day there's attacks on people like the president. But what type of work exactly did you do in the NSA? Was it that like protective work or?
Well, now you're going to make me feel like an old man, but okay, George, here we go. So when I think of operational, okay, uh, the thrillers of Tom Clancy, Bob Woodward, things of that nature, they come in waves. So we have a lot to offer, but all these things are happening in an electronic era. Uh, Currently, the director of national intelligence, a lot of people that work within that umbrella uh, start at the White House and have matured along the way. But now we're in an electronic era. So there you go. I'm one of those gentlemen in that spectrum that has taken whatever he has done and fast forward and put it to work. Let's say, and I'm going to watch the word artificial intelligence. I mean, I've watched drones mature to what they are now. How do you put that to work? And remember, my PhD is in Homeland Defense. Uh, Looking at it from a global perspective, it's big, but that umbrella of safety still applies.
So the NSA, and this isn't to try and derail, but I mean, I didn't know you did work for the NSA, so I might as well ask, what are your thoughts on Edward Snowden?
Excuse me, give me that question one more time, George. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, what are your thoughts on Edward Snowden?
You're cutting out on the last word. You're saying, what are my thoughts
On Edward Snowden.
Okay, sure. The contractor, correct? Okay. You know, when I went on the professional student road that my daughter mentions to me, um, I wanted to release a book entitled Transition. It had to do with DEF CON 1, 2, 3, 4. You get the picture, George? The level, top secret, code word. All right, I'll put it all out there. Yankee white, because I hold a Yankee white. If you did the research, there it is. Okay. Um, so we have a responsibility to the nation to understand that the dissemination of information can sometimes put people's lives in jeopardy. What you have within your own power, George, is a very powerful tool. And again, seeking out a certain, let's say, level of social acceptance has its process in information. Let me take it down a notch. Okay. There's certain things you would prefer our nation to be prepared for, because information, as President Clinton said one time, uh, he said, a lie can go around the world in seconds, but it takes days for the truth to catch up. So we have to watch ourselves. We really have to watch ourselves. But I do believe in freedom of speech. Okay, I have conversations all over the world, George. I spoke to a gentleman. We did tremendous amount of work in Ukraine, but we had to deal with people in Russia also, and recognize that we have a tremendous luxury of freedom of speech. So I would not want to violate that, but as a contractor, everybody signs certain NDAs, uh, and however the structure is, if they are challenged, you have to be prepared to suffer the consequences, right? Yeah,
Right.
because each uh, words have meanings. Yeah.
So moving on, um, when you were working on the presidential transition team between 2021 and 2022, right? What was that like? What were the day-to-day operations of that?
Um, sure. Uh, Again, George, on that, you're watching people that you know and take on certain responsibilities, and you're at least at my age, okay, at my age, uh, you're watching certain people take on certain responsibilities and recognize that their lives and their family lives are about to change. If I could just mention President Bush, uh, in keeping it simple, I'll say Bush number one. Uh, he flew in on his helicopter the day after uh, he had lost the election, and he had about, I don't know, 200 people waving to him up on the lawn. And as the chopper was landing, I was saying to myself, but but all of you have been fired. So yeah, that's a heavy thought, and that's in today's society, when things are people are living paycheck to paycheck, it becomes even more strenuous. Uh, Again, for badge holders, it's no different. When, I look at people, George, you're my replacement. I mean, that's how it breaks down. So we have to. That's why at the foundation, one of our main missions is to give scholarships out. Really, I mean, we have to get to it. We need more engineers. We need more doctors. We need to invest into technology and then embrace science.
So, do you think that what have you learned like in your career? If you had to put it down one, boil it all down and put it into like a few sentences or one, right? Preferably one sentence. But what have you learned?
Well, first of all, early on at the White House, one of the main sayings was that you learn something every single day, and that goes on. Uh, Main thing, wisdom, it's out there. Pay attention to it. History, pay attention to it. I would start quoting Mark Twain to you. Uh, uh, History does not repeat itself; it rhymes. And that would be what Mike brings to the table, because I'm also a professor at George Washington University. So I like to practice what I preach, and that surprises people sometimes in a larger scale. Um, we are messengers at times, um, but in my one sentence, it would be, it has taught me unity is important. And what drives that is music, and most of all, and it's going to surprise you, George, food. And that's what I bring to you. I'm actually, one of my colleagues is working with Jose Andreas, Chef Andreas. We can feed the world. Let's do it.
What do you think the most meaningful experience in your career was?
Um, well, that's hard, George. You know why? Sunday, I was uh, uh, one of the individuals that threw in the game ball at the Red Sox game. So So that was pretty cool. But most humbling was working at the White House. Um, yeah, and I've done other missions, but there's something about coming to work every morning, cutting through the West Basement, you know, um, or whether it's at night. And that's even better, by the way, George. So there it is.
Have you met the president or any of the presidents?
Yes, in a personal setting, that's kind of interesting in terms of today's technology. For example, you and I are meeting today. I just got back from a gathering of quite a few badge holders at the White House, uh, at the Army and Navy Club. And I said, because I am the chairperson, I said, before anybody gets on the phone and calls the president, because I know half of us in this room have his phone number and we could call him. And it didn't get to that, George. Does you get what I'm saying? And then the other thing is, I did have a little baffle the other day on the way to a luncheon where you couldn't take your phone in, since you were talking about NSA stuff. And he had called. And how do you explain that I missed the call from the president? My aide tried to tell me to take the call, but I guess I was just busy in the moment, right? So it happens. One time I had a call from the head of drug enforcement one day, um, and she says, "Oh, geez, the president's not at work this week." I said, "Yeah, but does that mean you're supposed to stop your job because you didn't see him?" And that was heavy because it involved a ship off the coast of Latin America. So that was kind of an odd feeling because she was new at the job, but she felt that before she could start the job, she was supposed to see the president of the United States. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way, you know. So yes, and I bumped into them after more than in the present. After they leave office, yeah, because a lot of our alumni still provide service.
So, what common personality traits do you see in in the personalities of the presidents?
Humanity. I think they're faced with that from the moment they walk in the door. And I can attest that I have been there when they walked in the door. And it's humanity. Uh, One thing that was declassified in this next book coming out. I'll give you the scoop, George. It was they had just gotten sworn in, and a crisis happened like 30 minutes later. I mean, you just became president of the United States, and you're whisked into a room of urgency. So humanity. It's a rescue mission, uh, a crisis across the United States. Nobody has any a crystal ball when that's going to happen.
Do you think that there are any keys to a successful presidential campaign?
Absolutely. One, the message. By far, if you cannot stay on message to the point that America understands, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that a candidate can make. Without listening to the stakeholders, the voters, that's it. That's why they spend so much money. Have you checked it out? It's crazy.
Do you, in recent times, right? The US government, people have lost a lot of faith in it, and people, especially now with the protective details of a lot of these individuals, ever since the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, it's just everywhere. It's like, why don't these guys do their jobs, right? And what do you think of what happened that day?
Without revealing operational and protocols, I'll say this. Let's take it by that day, right? Okay, it happened. We know it happened. Someone died. That's the proven hard fact. That's the failure of the mission. So the no failed mission, George, it's every single day from the time you walk through that gate. Now you've got to take the show on the road. And we provide that service, or at least secret service, all the way up to uh, their death. We have a president that's about to reach 100 years old. God bless. God bless. But service is still there. So it happened. What we need to do is we need to examine the current protocols that are in place and improve upon those protocols. Okay, whether it be upgraded satellite communications by far, and I again referred to the national security director, but I reflect to Dr. Dixon's program at National Intelligence. We can get very sophisticated here, George, but America has the ability to not only, let's say, see you on the ground, but hear you on the ground. So that's important. Now, how that gets down to micro, the individual on the ground, and how it's dispatched and so on, we're going to look at all that, all that. But don't you believe we could upgrade without even, I think we need to give Secret Service every tool in the tool bag that they need. If they can find mistakes and correct them, I think that is the way to go. Uh, when the president goes out in public, not only are we securing the safety of him, but George, we're securing your safety. And Americans need to come back to the reality of we are one, thinking back to maybe even Ronald Reagan days. I was there. Did I? That was the first week that I came on the job, was the Ronald Reagan assassination. So it happened. Um, there's certain drills that we do that are in place when that whole holistic operation goes into motion. Any breakdown of anybody in the circle will cause everybody else to fall, and we have to pay attention to that. We learned a lot from Ukraine when it comes to security too, by the way. I spoke to a special agent the other day, and I'm going to give him a big reach out because he was a big help. Matt Parker in South Carolina. George, he's down to earth, but the reality is he's in my network, and he did excellent work for President Biden and his family. It's just an incredible job to have. Uh, but you know, that being said, George, let's face it, you're right there in the middle of history, and you're just trying to stay focused. But everybody has to do their job, and I'm sure looking down the road, we're going to change things.
The last question I want to ask you would be, do you have any advice for young people?
Absolutely, I definitely believe in mentorship. Look at who your mentor is or is going to be, depending on where you're at in life. Um, but that's important. Um, I was fortunate, and I used to tell my aunt Gladys, uh, I was very fortunate to be raised by generals, admirals, ambassadors, and presidents. So wherever you find yourself in life, that's the starting point, and it begins with a mentor. And I've been blessed, and that's what I would leave you with, George, because again, as you work through this, may we get back together, and let's see who the next president's going to be.
All right. I appreciate your time.
Take
I'm
care,
gonna stop
George.
recording. Yep, you too. I'm gonna stop recording. We'll talk a little bit after the show.
Sure.
All right. 3, 2, 1.